Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is the third episode of my reflection series. Today we'll be going through all the books that make up my third omnibus of my fictional Diamond Dimensions universe based on Dan TDM's videos and the mods in the Diamond Dimensions series. So this omnibus explores really the aftermath of the events of the previous one, of Dan trying to get home and the rift system exploding. And so the first book in this omnibus is The Watchers Chapter 1, which really was a short book, I suppose. It was a different style of writing. And obviously for the story I wanted to show some consequences to what Dan did in Volume 5, to him trying to get home, the rift going wrong, and obviously having the dimensional dungeons break down would obviously have consequences for the Watchers and the recruits. So there was a decision, I suppose, as well, to get some of the most known characters out of the way, but knowing they'll be back, and also setting up some of the mystery in this with the Inspector, and also the story of Joshua's point of view. Also in this volume, in this chapter, I decided to call the Watcher series chapters. Each book was a chapter of the story, even though each book is broken up into chaptered parts. So it's sort of a five-part story. But so yes, also in this chapter I also set up, obviously, Precacia for the next books. I really just chose that as it was an interesting looking Advent of Ascension world. And obviously there's the whole explosion. And through this book, I really enjoyed introducing and discovering the characters as I wrote them, the different tone, adding some more backstory to many of the characters and their point of view. And I think I was inspired a bit by Rick Riordan with the character headings. I remember in his Heroes of Olympus books, I think he had those as it moved about. And also from reading the Star Wars Aftermath trilogy, I think I decided to go for a present tense writing with Joshua just at the end in that epilogue, which I think came out nicely with a description of the Egyptian street. And also I was inspired by Stephen King's Under the Dome, I think, for the interlude section, with a sort of omnipresent narration, potentially from the same void voices that introduce, not in these omnibuses, but in the individual books themselves, the 4.5 and Legacy stories, and introduce and conclude the Watchers series in the individual books. Also, as I began to write the story, I obviously got to the point where I didn't know how Doreen could survive, so it only seemed right that she sacrificed herself in some way so that the others can continue running to escape the wave of unstable rift matter. And for that, I think part of it was watching the Hunger Games at the time. And in the second film, I think, there's one of the old victors who sacrifices herself. So that's what influenced that decision as well. The next book in this omnibus is Volume 6 of the Diamond Dimensions, called The Circle of Life, which is obviously the Lion King volume. Yeah, when I came to write this volume, I decided I didn't want a recap, but a setup of the book to move away from more of just the linear story of 1 to 5, in a way, and have this be its own book. And also the setup of the Void's command was also like the book Dan got in the mod, which tells him to find the tree in the center of the world. But yeah, I really enjoyed this volume. It was something different but fun to work on, and also read through again when I came to editing these omnibuses. When I initially came up with the ideas for this whole series of books, when I started, Volume 1 and 2, I planned on skipping out all of these Lion King episodes. I mean, I still cut some episodes, like Upendi was reworked into Volume 8, but originally Volume 6 was going to be after Dan arrives back in the overworld on the carpet of black threads with no memory of the episodes of his adventures in the Pride Lands. He just has the peacock items as a souvenir of some unexplained dimensional travel. The series would have been 7 volumes originally, with a book coming out after the series is over, sort of exploring Dan's time in the Pride Lands and other places he'd gone to. But, so that idea, obviously, I decided to work into the main series, and I'm glad I did. It was the Pride Lands and then a random but meaningful emerald dimension that Dan was spat out in. And it was also entertaining to me to blend my own mythology and come up with some backstory for those worlds and sort of a magical explanation to the mods, dimensions and items as worlds once visited by ancient travellers, ancient humans in the emerald dimensions. And blending that with a film franchise I loved as a kid and still love. It was, I think it worked quite well. And also, I blended in so much dialogue and references from rewatching the films. It was also the time when the remake was coming out, so I worked out in whilst including the mods dialogue as well and expanding on the story that was already existing within the mods structure, while still adding sort of an alternate universe version explanation of the Lion King, the actual story of the Lion King films, where all 3 male lions had died. So Mufasa, Simba and Scar had all died at the gorge with the herd of wildebeest. And so it's an alternate history, and obviously in an alternate world because it's not quite like the Lion King with a giant tree of life. And yeah, I'm still amazed with how it came together really, with the things from the mod and also working with things from the Lion King 1, 2 and the Lion King 1.5, I think it's called. And also Rafiki's magic from the mod and stuff. Especially since I had the early quandary whether all the animals should speak or not. And yeah, in terms of the back of the lab sections, they take place right after Volume 5's ending. After introducing the idea and history of Gemma, it felt right to bring her into the books properly in this volume, after alluding to in 4.5. And yeah, so it's another case of alternate history where Dan never went through with his proposal plans and instead moved to the wilderness, as in 4.5. And yes, in this back of the lab section, I chose to have her and Akabi go through a rift. One is because it was a shocking consequence, I suppose, of Dan's actions, and 2 because I wanted to tell some sort of story with Gemma. I knew I wanted to do something that then became a story in Legacies. And I knew there was more for Mara and Imelda as well in Scene Legacies. Wanted to potentially had an idea to work a story with all 3 of those, but then that became the stories in Legacies that sort of intertwine but aren't a story containing all 3 characters, really. And I also felt it was the right time for Denton's clone drone Dan to come to the lab, which of course leads up to Volume 8's finale, and also the Legacies adaptation of certain stories. Speaking of Legacies, I think I actually forgot to include a mention to it in the blurb for these books, but it's only one short story from them, which is Unstoppable, which is the next in the timeline, next in the Omnibus. It's an Imelda short story again. Yeah, so reading through the books again, I realised possible inconsistencies with my timeline of events, which are now rectified in these omnibuses. As Mara shouldn't have been out of limbo as early as the story takes place, as it takes place pretty soon after Volume 5. But anyway, this story. It was another chance to explore the character of Imelda and the Twilight Forest again. And I also worked in things some loot that Dan got that I knew he never used in the series, and their potential no use in, obviously writing this after Volume 8, that was the end, there was no use for them in any of the stories, so I thought I wanted to include them and also tie into things of my own mythology in a way, and things from the mod like the quest ram and the Gemma story, obviously, and the Watchers as part of Legacies. And it also turned out interesting, I think, the idea that sort of came to me that Imelda might be the saviour of the Twilight Forest, because she sort of forcefully takes the Ram Spirit artifact, but at the same time he gives it to her, in a way, and she ends up using it to kill the Lich, which could be seen as saving the Twilight Forest from any future war and conflict, and from this sort of skeletal curse that has ruled it for far too long. And yeah, killing the Lich was quite a big decision, I suppose. Although, I mean, in the videos, Dan did it quite easily in terms of the actual series. And it also helped to answer what happened to the Twilight Scepter after Volume 5, because I realised as I was coming to write Volume 8 and Legacies that I never actually described what happened to the Twilight Scepter until reworking through the Omnibuses as well. So it was a chance to explain that and also bring Imelda's plan to some sort of conclusion that I'd set up in Origins and 4.5. Some sort of conclusion, yeah, before Misadventures. And of course this story also helped to set up that. That's one of the reasons of Legacies, obviously, as well. It's the Legacies of Dan's actions, but it also sets up the final Misadventures book. But that's not into the 4th Omnibus anyway, so... but yeah, it's always fun to write Imelda, and also see the transformation powder and the fan and the ore magnet in action, deciding what those really would be like, as I never got to fully explore them in my books. The next in the Omnibus is the one and only book in the Rift Chronicles series, Timelight. It came about, I think, because my dad wanted to do something different than the cave. He liked the idea of an old sort of wizard character, some sort of, a portal master, and yeah, it really comes through in Makura's characterization, I think. Rift Chronicles was a series idea that I came up with as a way for other stories to be told in the universe, my fictional Dull Dimensions universe, exploring the aftermath, again, of the Rift system breaking down. But Timelight was the only one published, yes. It was another great way to explore the Golden Dimensions world, well, one of them, from Season 3, as I knew I wouldn't be novelising the whole of Season 3, another 150 episodes or whatever, 200 episodes. Along with Season 2. But, yeah, it was a dimension already talked about, and a mythology I felt happy to flesh out the idea of Mysterium. And it obviously, exploring Mysterium then tied in nicely with Origins as we see it, and then the Mushroom in the Lich's Tower, and then ties in also with Legacies and future stories, I'll just say, which I didn't really realise it would, but it's one of those worlds more prominent than actually for the whole fictional universe, so it was good that it was explored in this book as a sort of standalone venture as well. And part of the reason is also thanks to the mod, the Advent of Ascension mod, that it fleshed out. It has its own mythology that I could just sort of weave in already to what I'd set up. Yeah, it was an interesting story, Timelight, with an original villain that came from some sort of shared brainstorm between me and my father, you know. We wanted some sort of threat that would, upset the balance in a gloomy, dark mushroom dimension. And so Timelight is some sort of space creature from an undetermined dimension, where a rift somehow appeared close to the surface of a sun, or some sort of magical star, I suppose. And yes, we had to come up with a threat, and it's this idea of light that sort of fast forwards time to what it touches. So, for one, the light would be harmful to the mushrooms, but it also makes them grow at an accelerated rate that they can't keep up with. So they wilt and die and are sort of drained of all their life. Yeah, and as sort of said, the book also serves as a great prequel to Misadventures now, retrospectively. But also it all just links up nicely to this fictional universe. The next book is Volume 7 of Dull Dimensions, The Final Frontier. obviously a nod to Star Trek in the title there, and a nod to the fact that if you know that space is the final frontier, then the book, well, half of it takes place in space, because yes, it's a book of two halves. Yeah, upon rereading, I'm very happy with the writing in this one as well. Just thought I'd say that. The first half follows Dan after some mad dashing through the rift system. He's just come from another of the golden dimensions, one of the Advent Essential dimensions, Lunalis, which is a bit of a nod, obviously a hint to where he's then just come out. Lunalis being that, lunar like the moon, so then sort of hinting to the fact that where he's come out now in this dark dungeon is actually on a moon. So many episodes of the actual Down Dimension series were Dan trying to get there, going mining and creating the rocket parts, which I worked into the story after. Some of the stuff I worked into the story after him landing back there, because in my story he'd been trapped trying to get home. And yeah, and it's fun to write a bit more sci-fi, work in stuff like the Fabricator, a little bit like Subnautica, a game that I'm quite a fan of, and also give some lore to the observers instead of just being sort of moon villagers. I think I was inspired by the show Fringe to personalise those, give some personality to those characters with sort of the cock of the head, and also the decision to make them telepathic, and also work the moon base into some form of ancient human with a skeleton mythology, like a nether fortress but on the moon. And also worked in small stuff from the Galacticraft mod. The second half of the book is from the perspective of Dan's clone and then Rana, for 4 chapters of the second half anyway. Which those chapters, obviously they serve as a way to reunite us with the characters and reunite the characters, but they serve as a setup for Volume 8, working in how the rifts impacted the Diamond Overworld, and also stuff from other episodes like the Werecat and the Scion Flowers, which became like the gnome entities, weird stuff, and also progressing Rana's story with her regaining her light, sort of reconnecting with the shaman staff. Something I I thought it just seemed a natural progression, really. But while tying in all the characters and the story reunited, one of the things that required more planning was the layout for the Ender encampment. Because I did research and use stuff from other Ender mods I'd seen down review, plus obviously stuff from the newer Minecraft updates like the Purpur and the Shulkers, and also tied it in with my own sort of mystic Enderman mythology and all the stuff from the Fire Ender mod again, and also the Ender spiders seen in Season 2 of the Diamond Dimensions. Yeah, that took quite a lot of planning, as I was working in what could be from the Diamond End, like the spiders, and thinking the Purpur as sort of a universal thing to the parts of the End that just hasn't been explored by any humans in the Iron Overworld, so they don't know of it, and obviously in the Diamond Overworld as well, the Diamond Dimensions. But yeah, so different stuff from Farlander's mod, and also all the different technologies then were potentially from the Golden End or the Emerald End, where the mystics sort of can communicate across sets of parallel dimensions and have put all their resources here for this big fight. Yeah, I'm really happy with the stuff I worked in and how that planning then paid off in Volume 8 in the end battle. And also in this book there was a decision to bring Mountain down at the end of Chapter 10 as a setup for Volume 8, as like a teaser for the next book. Bit of a cliffhanger, and because I knew I wanted to work them and everything that's come before into Volume 8, so that seemed like the best point to work that in. And yeah, just going back to my previous point as well, some of the episodes before Dan gets to the moon, I ended up working in that last chapter, in Chapter 10, like some of the stuff in the desert with the harpies, and also the another castle that's in that lake, because I was in because of Dan's world updating. I think the generation generated it in the middle of a pool, so I worked that in as a sort of important rift, a large rift. And yeah, it was just nice, again, I would say, to be back in the Diamond Overworld after the volumes spent in other places. It really was a reunion. The next book is the continuation of the Watchers series, the Watchers Chapter 2, Through the Rift. So the title says it all, really. It was the fact that the recruits were going to Precacia through the Rift, and that in the interludes Joshua was following the cultists through the Rift on Earth. Something that, following the cultists through is something that happens chronologically earlier. So those parts are actually earlier in the Omnibus, but I worked them in, obviously, as interludes in this book. And yeah, I found with the Watcher the story just sort of progressed naturally with my own imagination as I just sat down to work through it, and have the recruits split up, chased by the Sabertooths, and having the cultists going to Atum had always been in my head, and yeah, even if it may seem like it, there was no grand plan to the whole 5 books. But this chapter of the story, this second book, really set up the direction of the story for the remaining 3 chapters after it. And also the fact that there was a decision in this book to follow only half of the characters, those that the action was really happening to, and cycle through their point of views twice. So in the first Watcher's book, there were 10 sort of chapters, each one from a different perspective, but then obviously Marcus and Casper are out of the story, so there's going to be 8 chapters, as Dorian never got her own chapter as well. And so yeah, the 8 chapters, we cycle through Tyler, Sebastian, Felicity and Oliver twice, so they get 2 from their point of view. And so we get to know them more, which I think was quite good. And also got to have I had the whole plethora of stuff from the Evidence of Ascension mod to play with, all the Precacian mobs and the trees and stuff, like the giant snails, the Tortoise, and yeah, the tigers and the dinosaurs obviously as well. And also a sort of important artifact introduced in this book was the idea of Thoth's wisdom. I say Thoth, people say Toth, Dot, whatever. Yeah, introducing that at the end. And also, yeah, the whole reveal and setup from having the old hall from Egyptian times underneath the modern, the Watcher's Hall that we all know, which obviously gets explored later as well. I'll just say as well, this book, I think I was quite inspired at this time. I think I was on summer holidays, I was writing Volume 7 and Watchers 2, that I really just got up in the morning, no sort of technological distractions or school to worry about, and I just sat and really wrote not just a story, but I think the description of like the Atum Wolf and the Forsaken, I'm quite proud of how I reintroduced those elements talked about in Volume 2 in this book, going back to the Atum. The next book in the Omnibus is obviously, The Watchers 3, Chapter 3, The Crusade. The title again, the title should always allude to the content, I suppose, but it's talking about the crusade of the cultists and their mysterious leader as they're in the Atum in the interludes, and in the main chapters as well later. But also the crusade of the Inspector. That's his crusade. The idea is he's sort of a mix of Mulder, and I worked in some sort of thing in his inner dialogue, or his inner monologue. A bit of the detective from Markiplier's Ego Lore. I don't know if anybody knows about that, but yeah. This chapter catches up in terms of the interludes with the timeline chronologically, so I didn't have to reorder them in the Omnibus, move them further forward. But it's also back to a chapter or a section from each character's point of view, so I cycled through all 8 again. using Thoth's wisdom as a way to keep the story flowing and our communication between the different groups. And yeah, quite a few twists happen. You could say they're twists in this book as the story evolves. I had the decision to have Joshua taken over by the First Watcher of Earth, which is also, quite a big thing. In that section with that Pharaoh with the ruby armor and stuff, I worked in also stuff from the Atom 2 mod, which I didn't know was a thing until I did a bit more research for these Watchers books. So go and support that mod if you want. It's really added a lot more stuff to the mod as it was in Dan's series. Yeah, but in this book everyone's still separated, but the group that are out there are attacked. I came up with another original Atom artifact at that point. The Omnibus's Mercy, and as the story leads up to the climax in chapter 4, this book really moves things forward, and all the setup sort of helped structure everything to come with all these different artifacts, and having the cultists then you realise that the old Watcher of Earth has taken over Joshua's body, and is actually, then you see him interact again with the recruits. Next, chronologically, I sort of added it in here as I wrote it, as a little break from the Watcher's story. So between chapters 3 and 4 is something original for this omnibus, an original short story I wrote only a month and a bit ago, for when this video comes out. It's the Rift Raiders. It's in the Rift Chronicles series. It's sort of the only other entry in the series. So it's just a short story though. So yeah, as the cave took priority as something to get done with my dad, then the Rift Chronicles series never really took up. Obviously, it was the first book. Yeah, the first book in that series. Then Timelight became sort of a one-shot, as there are no more Rift Chronicles. But I just had the title Rift Raiders in my mind since before, I think, even working on the Watchers, and it seemed a good idea for this omnibus that it could serve as another entry to the Rift Chronicles to make it, an actual series. Yeah, the idea of Rift Raiders, I'd wondered at one point whether there would be a sort of supervillain, be a supervillain team name, like some sort of spin-off series, or just spin-off proper full-length book with at least Denton and Imelda working together for some sort of evil Rift-related scheme. But obviously that idea never came off, so for the sake of this one, for the sake of this short story, I went with another idea, my other idea that I had since raids were actually introduced to Minecraft, worked in some golden dimensions from Advent of Ascension to give Minecraft's villagers, villagers from the Iron Overworld then, some backstory and some explanation to their magic, as that was something I never talked about them in my other books. I thought they're quite an important part of Minecraft now, so it was nice to work them in and talk about the idols, especially as Dan, sadly in his hardcore world, failed with those. And yeah, it was just another way again to sort of serve the function of the Rift Chronicles series, to chronicle another aftermath of Dan's actions. Yeah, now we come to the last book, I believe, in this omnibus. Yep. Watchers chapter 4, called Resurrection, which yeah, it really is the climax of the Watchers story. What it's been building towards since before I really was building towards it, if that makes sense. And yeah, I think it was fun this one to give the other half of the recruits a chance to shine, to give them a bit more action and dialogue and chemistry to Sean and Mary and Jasmine and Ruby, and show their skills in action. And so to give them 2 chapters each, because the story sort of naturally moves to them anyway back at the hall as not Joshua attacks. And yeah, it was great in this book to really really lean into and come up with, flesh out the whole backstory for Hathset, the first Watcher of Earth, in the interlude section, and also while we find out through the characters' eyes, the prophecy and everything, and also working out and figuring out the sequence of events, and actually linking in Downstream of Fates as well with Hathset's too. So their visions are actually sort of the same vision. That's why Dan gets stuff about Egypt as well, but then they each get a personalised bit given in the same moment to both men. They're sort of, if you think about how the stories progress, they're both sort of the opposite ends of the Void's fated plan for this whole time of change that Jint's found out about. And I'm hoping this book served as an interesting read, subverting expectations, because as the story takes its course, the bad guy actually succeeds in their plan. But as we find out, Ramesses sends Hathset away actually. So it's, it builds up to this climax, and then you realise there's no real reason. The characters think about it, there's no reason for Ramesses to be bad. I've never written him as a villain really, in the one short story that he'd starred in 4.5. But yeah, I suppose it was a decision to bring him back. A big decision. But I'm glad I did. I also made a decision in this chapter to give Tyler the prologue and epilogue sections to keep that side of the story going. And hopefully, if you have read the Omnibus or just read the books individually and just watching this video now, having read the new Omnibus, where these are collected, hopefully the story was satisfying for you. And obviously there's still the 5th part to come in the 4th Omnibus. But that is the end for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe and share. It'd be great if this could get Dan's attention, but I know that's quite a long shot. Hope I didn't ramble too much again. I hope this was interesting. Thank you so much for watching if you got to this point. Goodbye.